You are now listening.
You are now listening
to the Black Male Educators Alliance podcast.
Lifting our voices.
Lifting our voices.
Welcome back. What's good, Doc? How you feel?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm good. You are listening to the BMEA Podcast, Lifting Our Voices. We are back after Thanksgiving.
Yes.
How was your break, man?
It was good, man. I had a good time, man. I spent some time by myself. It was good. I got my food catered. Shout out to Chef Mashia down at Pasta Bowl on the west side of Detroit. I never had seafood dressing. Oh.
Okay, Chef Mashia. Okay,
Chef
Pasta Bowl. Okay.
I'm gonna get her to make us at the BMEA event. It had lobster, shrimp. When I tell you that dressing was on fire.
Yes.
Again, shout out to Chef Michelle out of Pasta Bowl on the west side of Detroit. Check her out. She also caters as well, but good food.
Yes. Support small business for sure.
Small business, all black. She's great. Black woman,
yes.
support our black queen, doing good stuff.
Yeah.
What about yours, man? Did you go out of town?
Yeah, went to see my grandmother. She best cook I know.
Okay.
Thanksgiving is always her spot, man. And I would say two things that always help me recharge is alone time and family time.
Yeah.
And so, got to be with my family. She's, my grandma's getting older, so every year, every day to see her is a precious one. So, as I get older, I'm feeling like, how precious these moments are. You know what I'm saying? And then, she lost her sister a few months ago, and I was looking at the eulogy and all those things. I come to find out my aunt, she was on the city council of the city of Beaufort.
Oh, wow.
And she was mayor pro tem. And I didn't know any of these things as a kid. Wow. She was retired educator, 20-something odd years, and then when it's, so just lived a really meaningful, like purposeful life, and just being around the old elders in my family, it's just good to kind of like get rooted in that again, man. So always good to be there.
Man, that's good, man. I think that's important, man. Especially someone, my grandmother passed in 2009. My paternal grandmother, I never met. She died when my dad was younger, but my grandmother is like my world. She meant a lot to me. So I like cherish these, man, because there's nothing like a good grandma.
Grandma.
Oh man.
Yeah.
So like cherish those.
I mean, so much of our blackness is rooted in our grandmothers. If you think about it, if you think about like from the cooking to like the raising to like how we do things in our house, like our religion, like our closeness to God, like all of it is tied into our grandmothers. So, cherish your family. Cherish, that time is important. It feels like we never get enough rest anyway because it's such a working environment. It's such a busy, but it's so important. So, the winter sucks for me, but these holidays are always great. You know what I'm saying? It was always good to have a break, man.
And I'm mentioning, of rest. For one, when you're doing the work you love, it's doesn't seem, it's like we work crazy hard, like we do, and we work 6-7 days a week. But one of the things, we've been talking about and I really believe in is like rest, right? And I think we got a good setup at BMEA as far as like, instituting the week off for Thanksgiving and the 2 weeks of Christmas and a winter break and a spring break and then a summer 2 weeks break and then other break and vacation. Like that, I really believe in that, right? And I think it's important that to do this work is hard, but we got to find time to rest.
No, absolutely. And I think that, like, what separates BMEA as an organization, especially, like, working in schools, is, like, we are doing the work for kids and educators, but we're also, as an organization, operating under this understanding of, like, wellness. You know what I'm saying? And I don't think spaces do that. Schools definitely don't. No. And we talk about it, but it's not it doesn't happen. And I worry about our kids every year. Yeah. Every year. The more I get in tune with my wellness, the more I'm seeing how wellness isn't really a thing, a priority for kids. And, we expect so much of our parents at home, and I know that it is technically their job to raise children, but children are with us a lot in these schools.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we have a health class, but we don't really do wellness. We don't teach kids how to take care of themselves.
Yeah.
And you can't assume that parents know how to take care of themselves, much less help a child, or children don't need mental health or therapy. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of that that plays a role, but I would say definitely one of the benefits of working with BMEA outside of just the brotherhood and the doing the work, the meaningful work for Black and brown children, like, intentionally. It's just the understanding of how important it is to like, you got to be your best self to give your best.
Absolutely. Yeah, man. It's been a lot going on too, man. I know we can talk all day about all the mess that's going on out here. Yeah. So we shout out to a couple of days ago, the U.S. did advance in the World Cup.
Oh yeah. Shout out to soccer team.
Shout out. I watched the full game against England the other day.
Yeah.
Like, soccer is hype.
It is.
But like, man, I was like, them brothers got to be in great shape. They just running up and down the court. No, I mean, up the field. I'm saying, like, that is a lot. 80-some minutes. That's crazy.
Yeah, and you're right, because when you go to other countries like Jamaica or Brazil, like, soccer is their thing. So they're always watching soccer. It's a big national thing, and it's a really good sport. But man, that is exhausting.
It was exhausting watching them run up and down.
Like, it's a long game, man. And it's also funny when people talk about it all the time. I know it's not a sports podcast, but people talk about all the time how you look at these countries, right? Because it's really just come look at my country, let's see how good we are. But it's all of these African players.
Oh, yeah.
On all these European countries, South American countries, right? So it's a good little history lesson on colonization and slave trade and all that stuff, because
Absolutely.
teams are good, teams are not good. Those teams got a lot of brothers on them.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
They didn't sprout in France. You know what I'm saying? So
absolutely.
It's funny, but shout out to the U.S. soccer team. Sports. These months are great for sports, man. We're getting deep into the basketball and football as well. Your Bears. A lot of promise in Justin Fields, so that you can hold your hat on that.
We knew this was a rebuilding the year, so
absolutely. And I support. The honest truth is, I support any team with a black QB, because I know, like, there's an uphill battle in that. So
he's gonna be all right.
He is. He is.
I'm a Justin Fields fan.
Yeah. I've been hoping that the Lions. We are based in Detroit. I hope the Lions can do the right thing and grab them a QB. I don't know that C.J. Stroud kid or that Bryce Young kid. We'll see. But that's.
Well, the thing is, the Lions.
We ain't got to talk about the Lions.
We got to talk about the Lions. Go Lions.
Go Lions, man. So we have not much in politics. We had the midterm elections recently. A lot has happened.
Yeah. Georgia's back on another runoff
with Herschel Walker.
We're gonna leave that right there.
It's
Georgia, do your thing.
What's important, and I know I'll be beating a dead horse and people get sick of me, but everything that happens in this world, I'm like, we have to do a better job in schools, because politics is only the way it is because people aren't educated. Like, around, I'm not talking about just black kids. Like, I'm talking about the country is not educated
for sure.
And there is so much value to certain people to keep people undereducated.
Yeah,
and like, this is not a us issue, like, it's an educator issue. Like, it's a people issue. Like, everybody needs to be concerned about how undereducated we are as people. And I'm not talking about, like, the numbers thing. I'm like, you just don't know. Like, people don't know history. Yeah. People don't know politics. Yeah. People don't know economics. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And last side though, like, so crypto, I don't know if you've been following, the crypto's been falling. Yeah. A lot of those companies have gone in default. The Miami Heat had to take the name off.
I saw that.
Stadium. And no shade to anyone who invested in crypto, because honestly, like, I think that, to me, what was the beautiful thing was seeing so many black folks being interested in learning about financial investment. But one thing I had always have been concerned about is, like, if you understand how money works, you know that our government and major governments don't let money just move around them. You know what I'm saying? So if it ain't tied to them, like, I don't know how long it's gonna last. But it's it's going into some trouble. We're in a recession now, or we're going to a recession, they say. So, people really just have to be aware and understand, like, how economics and history and politics all are tied together. And we don't do enough of that in schools by far. And I was just talking to somebody the other day about how, like, why aren't, high school, you got PSAT, like, why aren't social studies or, like, history, like, standardized tests? Like, everyone shares the same history technically in this country, right? Those should be factual things. Like, those could be things that could be tested, right? Right? So, So the fact that they're not, is there no value in testing? Like the only thing that's valuable is testing mathematics and English, right? But that's a fair and just question, right? Especially social studies and science, because I know shout out to my social studies and science teachers. Their subjects don't get the same amount of respect, they would say, because they're not like standardized test subjects.
No, because I've been waiting. Yeah, my
Go ahead.
So let me say this, man. I'm glad you brought this up, because I think we misspoke earlier. At least I did. I know we did. We talked about Thanksgiving, and I want to revisit that for a minute. I teach you. Let's just rewind for a minute. Yeah. So I also teach at a local major university in this area, state, and we've had a module we was focusing on the first Thanksgiving, the meaning behind that, and you made me think about that. We talk about history and how history there's a lot of parts of history that's left out. And for years we've gone around and for Thanksgiving we've talked about how the Pilgrims and the natives or the indigenous folks they set up this and they were just so happy and loving and all this other. That was a picture that was painted, right? Untrue. And for years and years and years, we in schools, I was talking to some of my students, and they're 20 years younger, at least, than myself, and if not more. And they're still doing this. They did the same thing I did as an elementary school student when we had the sort of little headband with the feathers and all that other stuff, and we're like sort of reimagining, not reimagining. So we're replaying this whole situation that we thought was true. Yeah, they're still being taught that, right, in schools. Yeah, and so I just think it's important as an organization, BMEA, we're very clear that we are focused on the gratefulness and also acknowledging the amount of folks that were slaughtered, murdered, diseases, and all those things that were brought over by, our settlers, right? And I think we have to acknowledge those things. So when we talk about history, we got to talk about it all. Yeah. Right? We can't leave bits and pieces out. And I think there's still, we've talked about this on the podcast before, there's still this huge movement of folks who is trying to sort of reimagine what really happened. Right, and it's just unfair. And I talk about a lot in my class, and even in the PDs and professional development I do for BMEA, the importance of us, like, we can have like opinions about stuff, but there's facts. There's just facts, right? And so it's important for us as we just get off a holiday, which I enjoy. I think the present day meaning of what that holiday can mean. Yeah, but I'm going to take a more aggressive effort of not calling it a Thanksgiving, and also being very thoughtful of honoring the history of the indigenous people and who were harmed. And there are people who on that day they suffered. There's trauma involved in that day for them, right? Yeah. And so I think it's important for us to acknowledge that, and that's the part. To your point, is around we can give a standardized history test, but based on what facts, right? If we're gonna do it, let's do it on the facts, because every American citizen should know the truth about the first Thanksgiving and what that was all about. You're absolutely right, and I think that's kind of my point. I think if we get to a point where we're standardizing what science information, factual information we want to, and social studies, the historical information, which there are history degrees and history majors. Like, those are people are majoring in these things. Like, these are like academic courses. Yeah. But so why is it that you can kind of freestyle or freelance what you decide is the truth? Yeah. And narratives are important. And one thing I say all the time when it comes to educating black students, what is different about teaching black students, teaching black and brown students, is that this country does a really great job of white exceptionalism, American exceptionalism. American exceptionalism is white exceptionalism, though. Yeah, so, I'm with you. So, and the pro to that is that what's important is that kids need to have confidence and self-esteem and need to see themselves. So there are children in this country who see themselves through their American heroes. Our children, black and brown children, don't have as many heroes. And our stories, our narratives isn't told in the... They have heroes, they just not been told.
Yes.
Okay.
That's yes. As many has been told, right? And so, like, when we go to the truth about this country and how we got to this point, it is a tough conversation because there hasn't been repentance, right? There hasn't been retribution. There hasn't been, any type of like acknowledgement.
It has been. It just haven't been given to the people who deserve it. You know, we've done some work. We talk about land grant institutions. Penn State and Michigan State just had the land grant, which, you know, when I think about that whole game and the trophy they're fighting for is like the first land grant institution. That's welfare. Like, they were giving like free land and to still profit off of to this day. Right, to teach and learn how to like farm and do all these other things, and like those things were like they were given acres and acres, like, and when people were enslaved, African folks were enslaved, we could, like, they wouldn't even consider, right? But like these universities were given this and still profiting off of land that's not theirs. Yeah, like literally, and so now we have all these universities. We have these land acknowledgements. Now, right, that's going around. You can Google them all. Michigan State has one. Michigan, they all have, some are better than others, right? Acknowledging pretty much, hey, we took y'all land, my bad, right? We, and we're using it for this and blah, blah, blah. We still acknowledge that this is stolen land, da, 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 da. Some say that, some don't. Right? And so, like, that's the kind of historical knowledge that I think is important, especially as we talk about who's getting reparations or not. Like, there's some folks that have gotten the reparations for sure, and it ain't even reparations because I don't know what they trying to restore, right? But they've been given welfare and support and a leg up all along. It's intentional. Martin Luther King talked about it in one of his speeches when he was talking about how, like, we talking about the welfare of black and brown folks, support folks, but folks, these rich folks been getting, that's why they got where they at. They've been getting welfare and support from the government that's giving them subsidies and all. But that's not what this podcast is about, because we can go there today because I get fired up.
Listen, this is an educational podcast, so you teaching. You know what I'm saying?
I'm going to just drink my water.
No, the water is good too. What's important about this, because I don't want to get it lost on people, like, I think people understand that people's history not true. But what's important, especially for the kids' perspective, is like you're not giving kids a fair shot of like developing a perspective and a stance on where they stand in the world. Yeah. When you don't tell them the truth. And oftentimes you feel like, and we talked about this PTSS, kids come up in this world, black children, brown children come up and like, oh, I'm a part of a group of people that have been oppressed and haven't been able to be successful, or we're just slaves, or we're just natives or savages who ran off their land, and that's not the case. But that identity is important. Yeah. You have to know that your people were strong. You have to know that your people were advanced, right? And that the world didn't start 2,000 years ago. The world didn't start in 1400. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I mean? Like, those things are important because we're raising children who are trying to identify who they are through who they associate with, and build their self-esteem and their self-confidence, and then go into the world and say, I believe I can do these things, right? And I just don't think we do a good enough job with that. But part of it is because the history is terrible. We teach U.S. history first, whatever section of U.S. history we teach. We teach world history next, which is European history with like a splash of Asia, a splash of Asia. You know what I'm saying? The colonization. And then we teach economics like it's elective art class or something. You know what I'm saying?
It's at such a level that if kids don't even relate to it on a very basic level.
Economics is so important. Like, I majored in economics. People don't know that.
I do know that.
It's so, and I wasn't even interested in economics from like the business level, which is why I didn't go into business. Right? I struggled coming out of college trying to figure out what I wanted to do, because I didn't study economics for the sake of like, oh, I want to start a business. I study economics because it is the root of how this history has gone in this world. You know what I'm saying? And where things go and how things are, right? And so many other things are tied to it. You feel what I'm saying? And the math part was just easy, but like economics tells a bigger tale when you think about how people think. And when you look at this world, like if y'all are getting things for free, if y'all are stealing, then there is no meritocracy in your accomplishments. This ain't that podcast. You're right. This ain't that podcast. I'm sorry.
I'm trying to tell you, like,
this ain't that podcast.
We
were trying to talk about what we need to change about schools, right?
Well, we are talking about that. We are. It starts in so many ways. Yeah, it starts with the truth.
And it starts with the truth. I was in Philly last weekend to visit the BMEC conference, the convening in
Black Male Educator convening,
the Black Male Educator convening in Philly,
convening conference BMEC
and BMEC.
Shout out to the
what's that, the Development Center for Education? Yes. Yeah, shout out Sharif. That's what people know. Shout out Sharif.
Yes, the Black Educator Development Center for Black Educator Development.
And I love that because,
absolutely.
And what he said, and this is the biggest piece I took out of it. What he said was, ideally, what we want to really achieve, we're going to have to do with our own resources. But until we get to that point, we just have to be steadfast in doing the work in the systems that we have, right? And part of me thought for a moment, like, well, hey, let's say one day we have those resources. Let's say one day we get an investor who says, like, okay, you have the space and opportunity to do what you want with this, right? Now what are you going to do? Now what do you change? Because I think that oftentimes black people, oftentimes people go into education thinking, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to, do things differently. I want to impact children, right? All of us go into education because we want to do well by children. We want to, you assume, do well by children, but you become a cog in the system because you're doing the same things that didn't work beforehand because that's how you were taught. I was educated this way. This is what I think education looks like, even though I know it's not right. But what is the other way? You feel what I'm saying? And I don't think we have enough time and space in education because we got to work. You got to go back to school tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? You got to teach tomorrow. Yeah. Do we have enough time and space to sit down and say, I'm going to break it all the way down and rebuild it? What does that look like? Yeah. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So there's been I've been doing some research and looking at, because the spaces, they're not necessarily black and brown spaces, but there are some spaces that have the, luxury and freedom to kind of like rethink things, right? Mm-hmm. And what you see a lot is project-based learning,
yes,
right, which we support.
Yep.
And the biggest thing I really love about project-based learning is that, like, that is the closest thing they're going to get to a job, like then classes, because you don't go to nobody's work and sit at tables like that and listen to somebody talk. That's not how people learn. It's not how people work either. Yeah. So the project-based learning, at the very least, dealing with collaboration, dealing with like learning how to communicate with one another, because that's tough for kids. You know what I'm saying? That's tough for adults. Definitely tough for kids. Like learning how to work as a team, working towards a goal, right? So I like that. I also like this idea that you give kids a bell schedule, like a schedule. This is where you're going to go. This is where you're going to be. This is what you need to do. This is how, all these things, right? You give them structure, which is fine. Right, but then there is no gradual release of that structure, or that support, until maybe college, I guess, or if not, he's going to the workforce. So what you and I both know about any type of like learning is that you eventually want to build an independent learner. Yeah. You can't do independent learning without gradual release. Yep. Where adults are learning how to manage themselves and you're giving them the tools to manage themselves. We don't do that in schools. And I think that people are afraid of releasing some of that power and that structure because even though we know it doesn't work, at least it's tradition, right? Same thing with history. Even though we know it's not right, it's what we've been teaching. You know what I'm saying? There's a really good clip. Actually, I want us to show it now. It's a really good clip that talks about Simon Says, and I'm going to play it. And it draws a connection between school and prison. And I want us to watch it right now.
The game is Simon Says.
You know how it goes.
When Simon says do an action, you do an action. But you're only supposed to do an action if Simon says. Ready? Simon says, raise your right hand. Simon says, put your right hand down. Simon says, raise your left hand. Put your left hand down.
Oh, Simon didn't say.
Okay, y'all look good. Okay, Simon says put your left hand down now. Cross your arms.
No. Simon didn't say cross your arms. You need to make sure you're listening.
Okay, Simon says smile. Show us your teeth. You're only as valuable as you are able. Simon says raise your right hand again. Wave.
Why are you waving? You don't know how to listen? You must not be a good listener at home. Simon says it's not time for a bathroom break. You go when Simon says. Eat when Simon says.
Leave this room when Simon says.
There's only one rule. Only do what Simon says.
Simon says only speak when you are told to speak.
Simon says, speak to your neighbor now.
Why isn't everyone speaking now? You chose to play this game, now you're choosing not to play? How dare you ruin it for everyone else?
Simon says it's still not time for a bathroom break and stop asking.
Simon says you're not listening.
People that don't listen will never be successful. You know what? They don't even care.
They don't.
Just take out a book and shut up. Read. Simon says read.
Simon says it's time to file in the hallways now, one behind the other.
Straight silent line, tight to the right. Simon says if you can't be silent, how will you hear what Simon is telling you to do?
Silence.
I said be silent. Simon said be silent.
Simon said only 20 minutes to eat your lunch and be silent.
Eat faster. Eat faster.
Simon says sit up straight and be still.
Simon says tuck in your uniform. You don't want to tuck in your uniform? Go sit in the corner.
Simon says if you can't handle this classroom, how will you handle your jail cell?
Simon says, you will refer to it as Officer Simon from here on.
And Officer Simon says, know your place. Officer Simon says, show your teeth, boy. You're only as valuable as you are able. Officer Simon says, put your hand down. We don't raise hands here. There are no questions here.
Officer Simon says, you must not be a good listener at home.
At this rate, you'll not be going back home.
Officer Simon says, you will speak only when you are told to speak. Officer Simon says, speak to your cellmate now.
Why aren't you speaking now? You chose to play this game, now you're choosing not to play. How dare you ruin it for everyone else? Officer Simon says it's still not time for a bathroom break and stop asking. Officer Simon says you're not listening.
People that don't listen will never be successful.
Officer Simon said it's time to file in the hallways again, one behind the other.
Straight silent line, tight to the right. Officer Simon says if you can't be silent, how will you hear what Officer Simon is telling you to do?
Silence.
I said be silent. Officer Simon said be silent. Fix your uniform. Fix your face when you're talking to me. Clean your bunk, you fucking animal. Sit up straight.
I don't care if I didn't say Officer Simon said. Officer Simon said it. So sit up straight
and be still. Be still. Be still. Officer Simon says if you can't handle your jail cell, how will you handle your casket?
Man.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I tell you just the creative genius of our people, if we allow our kids to be liberated and free and not given back, I ain't even go there because that's another conversation I had about rubrics and how I think they're an exemplar of whiteness. But that's a whole other conversation. We're gonna talk about that one day.
We gotta.
We're gonna talk about that one day. I want to talk about that one day. But one of the things that it's just like to see the creative genius in a way of articulating all of the issues and concerns that we have. And I always talked about this. We've talked about this as an organization. Schools are antiquated. Like, they're antiquated. There's two things that haven't changed: church and school. And I think we talk about church a whole nother day, right? We're not gonna do that. That's not what this podcast is about. In Jesus' name. But our schools, they're not. I have been adamant. I was on the radio show, and I had a conversation with one of the callers about the fact that like our schools have not worked. And we talk about individuals versus a system. People are like, well, I made it, so schools worked.
In spite of.
And I get so frustrated, man, when I hear people say, especially black people, who say that like, well, I went to CAS or Renaissance and I survived and I made it. Like, what? And do you know how many people who did? Do you know how many people who are not at CAS and Renaissance, who are suffering, who are traumatized? Like the way we do schools, from the Bell system to how we put everybody and lump everybody by age level into a school, into a classroom, assuming that that's because you're all 17, you're going to learn this way and you ready to learn this. It's problematic. The way we engage kids in learning, what we're teaching them, all the kids. The pandemic taught us some stuff that we are not listening to. What I am very impressed with, and I'm going to let you jump in, our Gen Zers, our Gen Zers,
I got you.
Gen Z.
They know who they are.
They know who they are. Gen Z. I teach a lot of them. That population of people are students those young folks are about their life. And I'm so excited about how they're pushing, right? We haven't talked about even with the election, they actually made a difference. People ain't want to talk about that, right? Because they're not sort of buying into this narrative that young people don't vote. They're pushing back against sort of narrative around school. They're pushing back around how we like wellness and how important it is. They're pushing back. And they're slightly different because it's not like they're absent of work ethic. They're just like, why are we doing this? This don't make no sense, right? And they're questioning things. And so when we think about schools, it's going to continue to be that kids are dropping out. The dropout rates in some places are starting to climb again, right? Because kids, due to the pandemic, have realized, wait, I got to sit through high school to do this, and I can go make this money over here. Because what started happening was jobs started saying, oops, we're going to pay you $20 to come over here, $18 to do this. Yeah. Now, that's only going to last for a while, right? And I think the value of education is extremely important. Yeah. However, how we're choosing to educate people is outdated. Yes. And if we don't change it, we're going to continue to see we're the bottom of this and bottom of this. And for it to be one of the richest countries in the world, we're the lowest in math and reading scores and all this stuff across the country, which the score part, we could talk about, the biases involved in that piece as well. However, like this is a real problem that we're sort of, I think I chop it up as this. I think people are too lazy to do the work. I think it is much easier to continue that status quo, to continue to perpetuate these things that we know are not working versus to sit down and change it. It's so much easier to do that. And I get frustrated with these school districts and these people in positions who are, again, I said this before, making $200,000, $300,000 a year to sit and do nothing and not really want to do real change. Because it's easy to do that. It's easier to appease a board, which that whole process is problematic because we got a bunch of people who are not studying education, not involved in education, making decisions about education. And we got to stop that. We got to begin to get the people at the table that has done this work, that has studied this. This is a valuable institution, but a profession. That people need to learn how to engage in. This is like a science and an art of teaching and learning, right? And so if we don't begin to do that, and I'm going to be quiet because I get hyped.
Do your thing.
About this. If we don't begin to really look at, and there's some schools who are getting it, but they're not schools full of black and brown children. They're not. And we continue to do these things and wonder why kids as early as second and third grade start to disengage in school, right? Because we're giving them books, we're giving them workbooks, and it's like, what am I reading this, right? Like when I can get on the iPad and do what I got to do, right? So how do we begin to educate everybody involved, all the stakeholders on how do we methodically, very strategically begin to figure out how do we shift, how we make this paradigm shift? Because if we don't, and we continue to engage in this antiquated way of being in schools, we're going to continue to lose our kids. We're going to continue to lose our black and brown children. And we'll continue to give kids who go through the K-12 system enter college and have no idea how to be creative or think. All right.
I mean, education is a issue of the community. And that's what I keep trying to get people to understand. Like, we can talk about money, we can talk about investments, we can talk about real estate, we can talk about all those things. We're not changing the community without education. The children, right? And you made a ton of good points. I think the boards of these places and people high up the government, but also like this chokehold that the SAT and College Board has, and colleges. Like, keep it 100 with you. I'm not against college. I think kids could go to college, but the whole that college has on high schools to make sure that the only thing you're doing is preparing kids for college, which means preparing for the SAT, is ruining children's creativity, children's like joy. Which I one thing that and you brought this into my world, so I'm gonna give you credit. One thing that I think people completely missed the mark on, and I don't know why, and maybe it's rooted in whiteness. I don't know. I don't want to put it on them. But there's no joy in school. And they are afraid. They don't want kids laughing. They don't want kids having fun. dancing.
Play.
Like
Oh,
a kid is 7 years old and you upset that he's dancing in class.
Oh my God.
Do you know what age appropriateness means? Is happiness the antithesis to learning? We got to address that. What does learning look like? What does success look like? And does the SAT measure my success?
Yeah.
Because I tell you what, if I'm going to be a world famous artist, the SAT is not going to measure that for me. If I'm going to be a world renowned speaker because I motivate people or I help children, the SAT doesn't measure that. It doesn't measure my empathy. It doesn't measure my creativity. It doesn't measure my understanding of the world, the sciences at the very least. It doesn't measure much of anything except how well I take a test. You know what I'm saying? And so we're doing a disservice to children year after year. Yeah. And George Bush made sure that those kids don't have no extra years. They don't get no extra time. They get about it regardless of whether or not they learn. So we're gonna push them all the way through. And they're pushing to this world with a new world, by the way. The world that me and you didn't even grow up in.
Yeah.
So if we do anything, we at least have to revisit this educational this space every 5 years because the world has changed. COVID, man, we always come back to COVID because it was a shift in how we had to interact as human beings. Yeah. But it exposed education because y'all haven't got with the times. Yeah. And so now you have teachers complaining because kids ain't doing the work or kids just copying the answers. They can just go on photomath. Well, have you ever stopped to think that maybe I am not teaching them something if they can just find it? If they can just show me the answer, then what am I teaching them? What am I teaching them? That was the whole point of this conversation. Like, what are we teaching? What are we teaching? If it's just information, they can find the information. Are you teaching them how to find it? Are you teaching them why they need to know it? Are you teaching them like how we came about that information? Right? Yeah. Like what its purpose is? What its purpose in the first place? Mm-hmm. And is it even still valuable to them? Yeah. Because what is to me currently for a lot of our teachers out there who listen and who maybe struggle with kids and engagement, you have to be very honest with yourself. Every day a kid walks into your classroom with the world on his shoulders, life at home, social media. It's another podcast. You know what I'm saying? Life, everything's going on. Is what you're bringing in front of them, without you even asking how their day is what you're bringing in front of them even important? When will it be important? If ever. And if not, why are we teaching it? Why?
That's the question of the day. Why are we teaching it? Why we continue to do schools the way we're doing it? And what's the purpose of school?
What?
That's you know, I've asked that question for years. I remember writing an essay about what's the purpose of schools. What's the purpose of schooling, right? So I mean, you know, look, man, we can say I think this is something we should come back to as well, and maybe like our next show we bring in a guest to really kind of get some thoughts from some students, because you know one of the things I've been talking to a lot of young adults who are like in their late 20s, early 30s that have been part of a mentoring program, and let me just say this too, man, we've been doing, you know, this intergenerational mentoring program for over 15 years. Chris Watson been part of it. Our board member, Dr. Tishman, has been part of it. We have created this program that we've been doing, and the impact of this program. So this ain't nothing new. Like BMEA, we've been doing this for years. I know other people jumping on doing that, but we've been doing this for years. Yeah. Right? I no more sitting in the closet acting like we, you know, oh my God, this is new. Like we've been doing stuff for years before we even was BMEA. A lot of us were part of things that I think were potentially groundbreaking and very helpful to sort of building the community we want to build. But I said to say that I think I've been talking to some of these brothers who are late 20s, early 30s now when I had them in high school. And I had one brother call me from Arizona, and he said, I watch your podcast. Shout out to Robert Jackson. He called me from Arizona, like, I've been watching your podcast, man. I love it. And, you know, one thing I want y'all to talk about is, like, somebody like me who's 30, 31 years old, and I'm stuck. I come home every day. I don't know what to do. I'm a smart kid. I was his teacher in 5th grade. He was part of the mentoring program. Wow. Yeah, smart, brilliant kid. But I'm going to work. I come home, I be a good, you know, husband, boyfriend, and I'm taking care of my kids. But I'm like, I'm not being fulfilled. What do we do? Like, what do you do for these kind of people? So I want to bring some of these people to the podcast, on this podcast, and have that conversation around, like, because it's connected to the purpose of school.
Oh, for sure.
And what we didn't do to prepare these folks, right? Because I had them in 5th grade. I say this all the time. When people are like, who's your favorite teacher? And they, all my students, a lot of them on social media, like, I wasn't Dr. Lewis then, but Mr. Lewis, my favorite teacher. You had me in 5th grade. You went through a whole bunch of other school, grade levels, 7 more years, and I'm still your favorite teacher?
Yeah.
Problem. I'm cool with being one of them. I worked hard. I did my thing. But you're absolute. And I'm like, does anybody? Nah, not even close. Right? So I would like to bring them on. I think it's tied to this conversation we have around the purpose of schools and its impact on people and their inability to even, because schools should give people, I'm going to pause. I'm going to wait to talk about it. Yeah. But I do want to bring that forward because I know we could talk about this topic for a while.
No, you're absolutely right. And we are going to revisit it because I think one of my, I don't know if I told you this, but I think we probably talked about it. To me, the reason why we do want this work with BMEA is to change education. I think we were pretty clear about that. But we're not half-stepping about it. Like, we want to really change it. Like, we want to take that risk. And, we have to operate outside of the system to do that because the system doesn't seem to have any issues with it. Yeah. But we do. We know the children do. We know adults do who've gone through the system have it, right? Yes. Parents who have kids in the system, they have an issue with the system, but nobody is really in a space to say like, well, let's change it right now. Yeah. Even though to me it's one of the most dire things is going on that we need to address, right? Absolutely. And I think that it isn't just like, all right, just give me a school, I'm gonna fix it. No, we got to do the research, right? Yeah. We gotta listen to people. Yeah. We have to think about it, right, and have these conversations. But more than anything, like, we got to commit that that's what we want to do. Yeah. And that's why we want to have this conversation today. And I think people just need to know that because support has to be behind it. Yeah. Like parents, children, teachers, investors, like, colleges, they have to start like a movement, right? There's educational movements. And like I said, project-based learning was at one point was an idea. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? But I'm thinking bigger than that because we have to shift. We have to shift because public schools need to change. I don't want to just make a private school that we do what we want to do. That's right. You know what I'm saying? Even though like that might have to happen in a current space, right? Just for us to be able to do what we want to do. But I want to shift public school. Yeah. Right, I don't want to leave people behind. I don't want to like excommunicate or like be exclusive. You know what I'm saying? And so that's why what we do is so important. To kind of summarize us, Giving Tuesday did just pass.
It did,
and we want to first thank everyone that's supported BMEA in the years that we've been present. Like whether you've supported by donations, whether you've come to our events,
volunteered,
whether you volunteered. All the women who are part of BMEA that done the work. Shout out to my baby Stacy. You know what I'm saying? Yes. Like, continue to do the work.
All the Sands,
who believe in us.
ASU,
who believe in us. And so we want you to know that like when you donate to BMEA, not only do you help us continue our mentoring program, right? Which we all know the importance of having a black male in a young boy's life, right? That's beyond the point. But like, not only like are we helping them build character, but we're also going to start supporting them academically. We believe that it's important that black children see black men as academics.
Yes.
You support these fellowships with us having these same conversations and developing our educators to be actually good educators. It isn't just to be a black educator. Because there are plenty of black educators that are ruining kids. We want our brothers, before they spend too many years in the system, to understand like what they're going into and understand like what they need to be aware of and what they need to be doing. So as you support us expanding these fellowships, right? The work that we have to do every day with this work. You're supporting the Principal Wellness Program, which once again, I'm going to say, one of our best programs. I'm not going to lie. And I'm sure they would say the same thing, but just from the outside in, like seeing black men, principals, like leaders of communities who we know are overworked. Forget the pay, right? There are some of the highest paid people in education, but they still underpaid for the work that they do.
That's right.
And people don't understand that.
Been there,
you know what I'm saying? Them young brothers, them principals live in them buildings half
right.
the time.
That's
They
right.
take care of them kids,
That's right.
right? They support the parents.
Right.
They are pillars in the community. And so for us to have a program that's able to support them and take care of themselves
Yeah.
and us support them, like that's big.
Yeah, and I'm excited too, though. We got the Wellness Day coming up on the 17th.
Yes, sir.
It's the 17th. So, like, you know, we're going to treat them to some great things. I'm not going to say it out loud because some of it's going to be a surprise.
Yeah.
But we're going to treat these principals. It's going to be about 20 of them that we're going to support. So, like, to your point, your donation help us be able to do this work. Like, we,
Exactly.
in order to, like, this ain't free. This
Yeah.
podcast ain't free.
Yeah.
Like, that's the equipment we got to buy. That's things we got to do. I ain't free. He ain't free. Unfortunately, we wish we could do it for free.
No.
But mortgages,
Gotta keep
car
the lights on.
notes,
For sure.
gas,
For sure.
kids' needs are not
sure.
free. So, you know, continue to support us. Shout out again to, as Mike said, for those who've supported us and continue. And, you know, like Giving Tuesday is over with, but like shout out to those who are who donate on a monthly basis. We have recurring donors who, you know, they don't donate $50 a month.
Yeah.
$25 a month. I know there's $25 that you spend on something maybe that can go to something else.
Yeah.
Right? Make us one of those people. $50, $75, $100, whatever that fits your need.
And we're
That's
and,
important.
and because we operate such in the grassroots, that $25 goes a long
Man,
way.
absolutely.
We feed our boys in our mentor
Yes.
program
Every
twice a
time.
week.
Yes,
right.
absolutely.
Like we take them on trips. We got a trip coming up with
Kalahari,
the boys.
absolutely.
Kalahari, right? That's free for the kids. You know what I'm
It
saying?
ain't free
And
for
so
us.
it ain't free for us, right? But these experiences, this like them seeing us in it, like that's gonna make more educators,
yeah.
right? That's gonna make them like stay in school, man, and you know. It ain't enough of us to go around.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure that there is at some point. So that's part of the work.
Yeah.
So we appreciate everyone who supports us. Before we close out, is there any other updates?
No, I mentioned the wellness, the principal wellness on December 17th. We're going to have a 4 or 5 hours a day of just us taking care of our principals and them enjoying themselves and getting the love and wellness and support that they need. So I'm looking forward to that in a couple of weeks. I'm looking forward to, you know, we'll be having another podcast before that, so I'll say that for later. But I think that's it on my end. We're bringing both of the cores together for that.
Yep.
I'm sure we have another
ECTF,
ECTF Early Career Teacher Fellowship. Brandon Lane's doing his work in three of our school partnerships that we have, which we also do that as well. And so that's it. It's very, very important work.
All right. Well, we thank you for joining us again for another episode of the BMEA Podcast, Lifting Our Voices. We'll be back December 15th. So stay tuned and God bless.
You are now listening.
You are now listening to the Black Male Educators Alliance podcast.
Lifting our voices.
Lifting our voices.